Well, hey there, everyone. Hello. Welcome to today's live, another part of our bookkeeping series that we're doing here over the Equitable Money Project. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Meg Wheeler. I am a CPA. And at the Equitable Money Project, we love to talk about the financial stuff in both our businesses and our personal lives so that we can really make financial education much more accessible so that we can grow generational wealth, which is super awesome. But today we're going to get into the nitty gritty because today is all about bookkeeping. And if you have been checking us out, you may see that we've been doing a series on bookkeeping. Last week, I walked you through exactly how I do the bookkeeping in my business in 20 minutes or less. I think it took me just about 21 minutes, but that was because I was chatting the whole time. But today we're going to talk about this question that we get a lot, which is, should I DIY my bookkeeping or should I hire a bookkeeper? And this is, like I said, we get this question a lot. It's by far one of the number one most asked questions. And what usually happens when this question comes up is it's because somebody has been ignoring their bookkeeping for a while. And then they're like, oh no, I got to get into this. I got to figure this out. And then they go, well, what do I do now? Do I do it myself? Do I hire somebody? How does this work? So let's talk about this. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is, and by the way, for folks who are here live, thank you so much for being here live. Please go ahead if you've got questions, put them in the comments. I would love to answer them. I also want to let everyone know that for everyone who's watching this video, we have got some really cool things coming up. So I'll talk to you a little bit about that in the end. But first, I want to just mention the first thing that I get asked when it comes to talking about this question, which is, what exactly does a bookkeeper do? Okay, so there's a lot of confusion around this. And I think a lot of times people confuse a bookkeeper with a tax preparer or an accountant, or even sometimes a financial advisor, but we're going to clear all that up. So what exactly does a bookkeeper do? Well, a bookkeeper is the one who manages your books. What are your books? Your books are the financial records of everything in your business, the money coming in, the money going out, what's in your accounts, who owes you money, who you owe money. And back in the day, that used to be an actual book, like a ledger. Now, of course, it's an accounting system. So a bookkeeper is in charge of keeping that system up to date. They go in there, they're going to categorize your transactions, they're going to record your invoices, they're going to make sure that what's in your system matches what's actually in the bank account, what's actually in the credit card. That's what a bookkeeper does. Here's what a bookkeeper does not do. A bookkeeper does not do taxes. Necessarily, but they certainly can offer these additional services. But in the role of bookkeeper, a bookkeeper does not prepare your taxes. A bookkeeper does not offer tax strategy or advice. A bookkeeper does not offer investment strategy or advice. A bookkeeper is not a CFO, meaning they're not necessarily going to help you map out financial projections or even a budget. Now, again, some bookkeepers could also offer these services, but in that very defined role of bookkeeper, that's not what's included. So when you're thinking about, well, should I DIY this or should I hire a bookkeeper? The role that you're really talking about is someone to go in and do basically 2 to 3 things. Number one, categorize all of your transactions. Number 2, reconcile your accounts, which means to make sure that what's in your accounting system matches what's on your credit card statement or in your bank account. And number 3, to make sure that if you have clients paying you, that all those invoices are set and set up and paid and all of that. And if you've got bills to pay, that those bills get paid. That's what a bookkeeper does, okay? So another question I get asked a lot is, what accounting system should I use? Like, does it matter if I'm hiring a bookkeeper? Do I need to look for a certain accounting system or someone who knows a certain accounting system? And then kind of how does all that work? As most of us probably all know, QuickBooks is one of the most popular accounting systems in the world, but it's not our favorite. It's not the one we love. In fact, we're huge fans of Wave Apps. We highly, highly, highly recommend it. And you can go check that out at waveapps.com. But the point I want to make here is that ultimately you should choose the right accounting system for your business. And we actually have videos on this as well, so I'm not going to go into all the details here. But what I see happen too often is folks will hire a bookkeeper who will tell them, well, I use QuickBooks or I use Xero or I use whatever it is. And then the person will get on that platform. And then if that bookkeeper leaves, or the person just decides they want to move on from that bookkeeper, or even if they're still working with the bookkeeper, if it's not the right platform or tool for your business, then you're going to find yourself needing to move to a new platform or tool, or just not understanding what's happening within the finances of your business, or also just not having a tool that's doing what it's supposed to do for your business. And so my number one piece of advice to folks when they're thinking about hiring a bookkeeper is don't choose a bookkeeper who dictates to you what the platform is. Figure out your platform first, or if you want, figure it out in conjunction with a bookkeeper. There's a lot of great bookkeepers out there who can do multiple platforms, and they are able to talk through with you the differences and help you choose. But don't just go find a bookkeeper and then they say, okay, this is the platform I use and you must use it. And then you're stuck on that platform. Okay, so keep that in mind as well. Now, another thing that comes up with hiring a bookkeeper is actually the accounting platform itself. So we just talked about like the different options that are out there. But one of the other big mistakes I see folks make when it comes to hiring a bookkeeper is their bookkeeper ends up owning their accounting system. What do I mean by this? So you find a bookkeeper, you decide to hire them, they get you set up on, let's say, QuickBooks. Well, the bookkeeper actually owns the QuickBooks account, not you. So if you end up leaving, you don't want to work with them anymore, or something happens to them, or again, even just normal course of business, you want to be able to have access to that system. Ultimately, if they're the owner of that system, it's going to be a lot harder to get access to it. This is why when we work with our bookkeeping clients, again, we use Wave Apps, big fan of Wave Apps. But when we work with our clients, oh, and by the way, we've got an affiliate link for that for anybody who wants to check out Wave Apps, equitablemoneyproject.com/Wave Apps. But for anyone who comes to us and works with us, that is the platform that we work with. We're very clear that we don't use QuickBooks or Xero because it's just another system. It's a more complicated system. And for us, we just don't want to do it. We don't tell anybody they have to use Wave Apps. They're welcome to go work with someone else who uses a different system. But for us, that's what we use. But for folks who come to work with us, we actually have them create their own accounts on Wave Apps. They give us access, but it's their account so that they own it, so that if they ever leave us or something happens or whatever, they have access to that account. So make sure if you are going to work with a bookkeeper that you own your accounting system. Now, another question that comes up a lot is, what about working with a company like The Collective or Bench, back when Bench still existed, where you're signing up for essentially a package that includes bookkeeping? And here's my thought on that. First of all, that's fine in theory. The challenge with those companies tends to be, when it comes to bookkeeping, is that they have their own proprietary bookkeeping tool. So like Bench had their own tool, Collective has their own tool. So again, much like the issue of like before, where you don't own your bookkeeping system, it's the same problem here. You don't own your bookkeeping system. And so if you decide to leave or whatever, you don't have access to that system because it's not yours. And so my recommendation is that if you are going to, work with a company that has kind of like a package or bundled system where you get bookkeeping and taxes and all of that, make sure you can, number one, own the system, and number two, that it's your own system, or that it's not a proprietary system to them. Because what happened to a lot of folks who used Bench, if you remember Bench, was Bench fell apart, shut down. And so all of a sudden, everybody had to move their books off of Bench to a completely new tool because that system just didn't exist anymore. All right, so this brings us all back, though, to the real question of, well, should I DIY my bookkeeping or should I hire a bookkeeper? And there's a few things I want you to think about when you're asking yourself this question. The first is your bandwidth. And this may seem like an obvious one, but ultimately, if you don't have time to sit down, let's say 30 minutes a week to do your own bookkeeping, then that is going to get pushed by the wayside, right? It's not the thing that anyone prioritizes. It's not the thing that anybody wants to do. And so if you don't have the bandwidth to manage that, or have someone on your team who has the bandwidth to manage that, it's going to get pushed. And the problem when your bookkeeping gets pushed is not only does it then mean you have so much more work to do down the road to catch up, but it also means you don't have access to accurate, critical, real-time data around the money in your business. And when we don't have that, we can't make good, strategic, long-lasting decisions about our business. We can't understand where the money's coming from, what the profit potential is, or profit realization is on something we're selling, where we're spending our money, if we're overspending, if there are things we're being double charged for, if clients aren't paying us quickly enough. All of this stuff is what we can understand from our bookkeeping data, plus more. So if we're not staying on top of it, we're just not getting this crucial information. So that's the first question to ask yourself here. I'm going to go ahead and put that in the chat, or put that in the thing, is what is your bandwidth? So do you have the time? And again, I said about 30 minutes a week. I think that's a realistic amount on an ongoing basis. It doesn't mean that every week it's going to take you 30 minutes. And certainly there are businesses that will need longer. But I think that's a good place to start. And I would also encourage you at the beginning to maybe plan for a bit more, an hour a week. Again, not that I think it's actually going to take that, but as you're learning that role, you might want to have that time. So what is your bandwidth? The second question to ask is what is your ability? Let's get that one up there. What is your ability to do this? So I'm not just talking about time now. I'm actually talking about where you shine, what your skill sets are, right? I don't mind bookkeeping because I like going in, I like seeing the numbers, I like seeing the transactions, I like, even though some of the work can feel kind of monotonous, it allows me to see what's happening in the business. And so I don't mind doing it because I like that insight. But if the idea of sitting at a computer for 30 to 60 minutes a week, looking at numbers and categorizing transactions feels really, really heavy for you, then there maybe is a good time to hire a bookkeeper. And you might be thinking, well, yeah, I don't want to do this, but I also don't have the money to hire a bookkeeper. So great advice, but thanks for nothing. And I get that. And we can talk about that a little bit in a second. But I also want you to remember that if you are spending 30 to 60 minutes a week doing something you really hate in your business, just because you don't have the money to pay someone to do it, I guarantee you that 30 to 60 minutes is better spent bringing money into your business that you could then use to pay somebody. So just my thought there. But what is your ability to do this? Is this work that comes easy to you, or easy enough that you can do it? Or is this something that's going to feel really hard and heavy, and it's going to be really hard for you to stay on top of? Because again, going back to my first point, if you can't stay on top of this, then your business is really going to suffer for it. The other question, and I actually think this is the most important question, but I understand why this isn't the question that is going to make the decision for some of us. And that is, what is the cost? And when I say what is the cost, I don't mean what is the physical price you're going to pay to hire a bookkeeper. I mean, what is the opportunity cost? So if I spend 30 minutes a week in my business doing bookkeeping, what am I giving up to spend that 30 minutes doing bookkeeping? Am I not doing client calls? Am I not doing marketing? Am I not creating content? What would I otherwise be doing with this time that is now being spent doing bookkeeping? And for most of us in our business, there is probably a better use of our time, not just in bringing more money in, but in fulfillment, in joy, in satisfaction, in creating impact within our businesses. So when you're thinking about this question of, do I DIY my bookkeeping or do I hire a bookkeeper, really want you to think about what is the true cost of it. Now, the reason I said this is the absolute most important question is because ultimately in our businesses, when we're growing them, and I don't mean we necessarily have to be aiming for 7 figures or anything like that, but when we're growing them in terms of money, in terms of impact, in terms of profit, in terms of flexibility, into whatever it might be, we need to understand what resources we're using and what the ROI, the return on investment, is of those resources. And resources are money, resources are time, resources are energy, all of that, right? So if I'm spending 30 minutes a week doing my bookkeeping, that's a resource, my time and my energy, that is being used to do that bookkeeping. If there is something better I could be doing with that time that is going to have a higher ROI, return on investment, in my business, and again, that ROI doesn't have to be dollars. It can be energy, it can be time, it can be satisfaction, it can be joy, it can be impact, then that is something I should consider. So that's why this is the most important question. The reason why it's a question that doesn't often get asked in this consideration is because if you're asking yourself, should I DIY my bookkeeping or hire someone? It's probably because you don't think you have the funds, or you don't feel like you have the funds right now to pay someone to do your bookkeeping, because most people who are flush on the cash for this are probably not asking themselves this question unless they absolutely love doing bookkeeping. So this is why this question ultimately doesn't really get asked by the folks who are trying to figure out DIY or hire. But here's why I want you to think about it anyway, because even if you don't see the cash in your bank right now, I want you to go back to the point I made earlier, which is, could you spend that same 30 minutes going out and getting a client, getting a sale, bringing in the money that would pay for someone to do this work plus some? And if the answer is yes, and by the way, the answer should be yes, because I would think for every single person watching who's a business owner, if the best use of your time is bookkeeping, then you should have a bookkeeping business. Otherwise, there's got to be a better use. And so I really want you to think about, well, what is that better use? And how can I find a way to work towards that so that I ultimately can afford to replace myself in this bookkeeping realm? So when it comes down to it, this question of should I DIY my bookkeeping or not really is a question of the best utilization of the resources in your business. And by the way, spoiler alert, this is actually the answer to any question in our business is what is the best utilization of resources to get the best ROI? And again, I want to really stress this here. ROI is not always money. ROI can be joy. ROI can be comfort. ROI can be flexibility. Okay, so you need to understand and define what your ROI is, but that is really the question here. How do I best deploy my resources to get the highest ROI in my business? ROI as I define it. And also it can be different, right? If we're putting out, if I'm going to host a webinar or a workshop that's going to take me an hour, our ROI measurement for that may be money. We're going to sell it and we want to get money back for that time. But if I'm choosing not to do my bookkeeping and instead to hire someone to do the bookkeeping for me, that ROI on the money I spend for that person may not be money. And it isn't probably going to be. Maybe it is. Maybe I'm going to take that 30 minutes a week and go out and make more money. Sure. But maybe I'm also going to just spend that 30 minutes with my family or taking care of my health or creating content that excites me, that has an impact. So my ROI on that one might be different than it is for the workshop that we're creating. Okay. So when you're thinking about, do I DIY my bookkeeping or do I hire somebody? It really should come down to, is this the best use of your resources to get the best ROI? And if you're in the position where you say, cool, but I just literally do not have the cash, then I would encourage you to look at everything that you spend your time and energy on right now in your business and decide which one has the biggest cost. And again, cost can be money, it can be time, it can be energy, it can be satisfaction, it can be happiness. So which one has the biggest cost? And if it's bookkeeping, if you're like, this is literally the last thing I ever want to do, and I would do anything I could to get rid of this task, then I want you to figure out a game plan for how you get that taken care of. So if you know it's going to cost you, X a month, and you don't have that money yet, how can you put a plan in place so that every time you make a sale, you put a few dollars aside so that you can eventually pay for X a month? Now, the last thing I want to mention for anyone who's watching who maybe really just can't afford to hire a bookkeeper yet and is feeling kind of down about it, I actually think that every single person in business should at some point have to do their own bookkeeping. And the reason I say that is because the best way to understand the inner workings of your business financially is to do the bookkeeping. As my, the common phrase my husband always likes to say, I like to see how the sausage is made, right? As the CEO of my business, it's really important. And by the way, I mean this for every role in the business. I think it's critically important, but it's so powerful to do the role and really see how things work, because that's when you figure out things that aren't working so great, but it's also when you figure out opportunities. So if you're in this position where you've never done anything with the books in your business, you have no idea about it, I think you should do it. I think you should dive in for a little bit and really start to understand how the finances of your business work. And then when you get to the point where you can go ahead and hire a bookkeeper. So I'm going to wrap it up there. If anyone has questions, definitely put them in the chat for us. But I want to tell you about actually 2 resources that I'm really excited about. The first is one that we are just putting the finishing touches on right now. It's our DIY bookkeeping kit. So if you went through all this and you're like, cool, the answer is still that I need to DIY my bookkeeping at this point, we have got you covered. Now, this kit, which we're going to be launching next week, so we're doing another live next week. I'm going to drop the link then when it comes out, and I'm really excited about it because this kit is really more than a kit. Kit is an interesting word choice for that this because it really is every single thing you need to get the bookkeeping in your business set up and running. Now, we do it all through the Wave Apps platform, which I mentioned is the platform we really love, but you could do this on any platform. We just think that's the easiest, most cost-effective one for the business owners that we work with. So inside of the DIY Bookkeeping Kit, we give you literally everything to walk you step by step by step by step through what you need to do to set up and manage your bookkeeping. Super pumped about this. Now that's coming next week, like I said, and if you're already on our email list, you'll have the opportunity to grab it before anybody else or just join our YouTube Live next week. The other resource we have, which is available right now, is our DIY bookkeeping checklist. So this is completely free, but this is our checklist that shows you every single step you need to take to set up your bookkeeping. And what I love about this checklist and why I designed it the way I did is because I didn't want to make it feel super overwhelming. I wanted it to just give you really like a guide on how to get started with this stuff. And so you can grab that. I'm going to drop the link in a second when I find the link. I got to find the link. But you can go ahead and grab that now to get started in anticipation of the DIY Bookkeeping Kit, which is going to go so much more in depth, literally walking you through. It's full of videos, video walkthroughs that I've done to show you exactly how to set everything up. But the checklist is going to get you started, okay? So let me see. I'm going to kill some time. I should have grabbed the link before I hopped on this, but I didn't think about that because that is not my skill set. That is not the thing I am best at. So I'm going to go ahead and just grab it here. And that way you'll have the link to that DIY bookkeeping checklist, and you can grab that now. You can get started, and then, where is it? Here we go. And then when that DIY bookkeeping kit comes out, you can go ahead and grab that as well. So here is the link. It's not a pretty link. It's an ugly link. But you can grab it from there. And we'll be back here next week talking about bookkeeping again. Our next two sessions. So one of the sessions we're going to talk about as part of our bookkeeping live series for the rest of this month is we're going to be talking about the most common mistakes people make when it comes to their bookkeeping and really kind of diving into that. And then I'm also doing an entire live on what to do if you really haven't been doing your bookkeeping. Your bookkeeping's a mess. You're afraid to open it. You're stressing out about it. What do you do? How do you approach that? And so we're going to talk about it there. So thanks everyone for tuning in. Don't forget to go down to the comments to grab that link to the DIY bookkeeping checklist, which is completely free. And then next week, stay tuned for our DIY bookkeeping kit, which I will launch live on this YouTube Live next week. See y'all then.